third order analysis is focused on cards in the context of the metagame. After a card is evaluated in isolation, then, in the context of a deck, a card is evaluated in the context of the current game. A metagame always develops in a card game of sufficient size. After enough time, a format may be solved, with a handful of dominant decks seeing the majority of competitive play. Decks usually rise to power through two means, either being particularly strong in isolation, or by having a favorable matchup against the other dominant decks. Often, rock, paper, scissors formats will develop. For this discussion, individual metagames will be brought up to illustrate examples, but generally the metagame refers to the abstract concept. As a quick note, Hearthstone has two formats, Wild, which is non-rotating, and Standard, which is composed of the last 2 years of expansions, as well as the basic and classic set. Due to the two different formats, standard legal cards may have a second evaluation when considering the Wild metagame. The essence of third-order analysis is counterplay. Although tech cards like Dirty Rat and Unseen Saboteur are examples of counterplay options against specific combo decks, the majority of counterplay is predicated on board presence, as most strategies use board-based pressure to win the game. There are several terms which address the concept of counterplay, with common examples being threat and response, or question and answers. In this case, referring to a high-tempo minion, and then a reaction to the minion being on board. I will be using questions and answers out of personal preference. A question can be a big minion, like a Mountain Giant or Edwin Van Cleef. Certain high-priority targets like Vicious Fledgling or Gadgetzan Auctioneer can also be regarded as questions. Answers are most often in the form of removal, keeping in mind that rush or charge minions can function as removal by method of trading. The important aspect of answers are that they need to be fast. Spells and battlecry minions are fast responses, described in more detail in first-order analysis. Weapons are also fast responses as they have charge, allowing for the weapon damage to be dealt immediately. Finally, minions with attacker's initiative, either being left over from previous turns, or minions played from the hand with the keyword charge or rush, are fast responses. Removal answers may be further subdivided into hard and soft removal. Hard removal deals with the minion unconditionally, with cards like Assassinate being good examples. Soft removal is conditional, either having restrictions on targets like Shadow Word Pain, or damage-based removal like Fireball. Additionally, soft removal includes cards which reduce the threat but not remove it entirely, with examples being Humility, which greatly reduces the card's tempo since the attack is reduced, or Sap, which denies attacker's initiative for a turn and forces your opponent to repay the mana cost of the minion. Sap is a particularly interesting card, since it trades card advantage for a swing in tempo. Although only single target removal has been discussed up to this point, mass removal also constitutes answers, although sometimes using a scalpel is better than a hammer. Cards like Vanish and Twisting Nether are sometimes good answers, but the symmetric board wipes also affect friendly minions, so more discretion is necessary when calculating the board state. The metagame will generate answers as powerful cards rise to prominence. For example, widespread use of Mountain Giant in Handlock allows for a big threat in the early game, posing a question. The answer must be an early game removal option. As early as turn 3, Shadow Word Death can be played to deal with the opponent's question. As a result, Priest might see more play in the metagame to challenge the dominance of Warlock. Other tech cards like Hemet Nessingwary, EMP Operative, and Hungry Crab are narrow tech cards, sometimes slotted into decks in the specific metagames. Each card deals with a different tribe, and as a result, surfaces into the metagame as answers when a Beast, Mech, or Murloc deck is the dominant player in the current metagame. As a final note on questions and answers, Efficiency is a topic from first order analysis, which may be expanded in this segment. If your opponent creates a 7 mana question, and you can answer it with a single 5 mana card, then you have effectively gained a 2 mana advantage over your opponent. If you can capitalize on that advantage and manifest the mana advantage into tempo, you can swing the game in your favor. If your answer costs less mana than your opponent's question, it is considered to be efficient, while if the card is more expensive, the answer is considered inefficient. Card advantage is also an important consideration for efficient counterplay. As for example, Soulfire is only 1 mana and can deal with the 3 mana threat of a spider tank. From a mana perspective, this is efficient. However, when we consider that Soulfire has an additional cost, that being the discard of a card in hand, Soulfire seems comparably less efficient. Sometimes in the metagame, there is a question without a good answer. This can pose an immediate threat, especially if it polarizes games in favor of a particular combo or opening strategy. As an example, Small-Time Buccaneer and Patches, before the nerfs, constituted a sizable threat on turn 1. For a single mana, there was no options available to deal with both minions. Mages would usually burn the coin to use Frostbolt inefficiently, which only dealt with one threat. After the Small-Time Buccaneer nerf, efficient answers became available, like Whirlwind or Potion of Madness. The combination of Small-Time Buccaneer and Patches warped the format, a perfect segue into fourth order analysis, but that will be the next video.